Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Red Letters Podcast. Before we move on, we just want to say 1, 2, 3, Happy New Year! I hope you just felt celebrated. Back to the... Yeah, exactly. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode. This is Red Letters, where we talk about topics that can be life transforming if you engage yourself and if you choose to consider what the topic is and how to apply it to your life. We just want to welcome you this week. We're still working through the Sermon on the Mount. This week, we're going to be talking about a popular thing that's quoted mostly from people outside the church, sometimes people inside the church too. But it's called Do Not Judge. So we're going to go read through that in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 6, and then we'll dive into this topic. Go ahead, Ruth. You want to read that?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gio.
All right, Matthew 7, 1 through 6. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite. First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample their pearls and turn and attack you.
So good. So, has anybody had somebody tell you this, or what does that seem like it means to you when it says "do not judge others"? Because I know a lot of people are famous for saying, like, when they're doing something that maybe is a gray area or something that goes against most people's conviction, and you kind of, hey, you think you really should be doing that, and they'll be quick to say, hey, don't judge me. So what do you guys? Anybody want to take a stab at that, or what they're trying to say, and what do you think that Jesus was actually meaning?
So I was personally confused, or not confused. I would always think, like, are we to judge? Are we not to judge? Because, like, here it says don't judge, but then Paul starts to write, like, or not Paul, like, judge righteously. But then he talks about, like, amongst believers, you could judge. Yes. And so that was a difference that I found out recently, is that we're able to judge believers within the church. But as far as, like, non-believers, we're not to judge them. And so that's where I'm getting at here. Because, like, that's the part, like, people use this to almost explain away their sin. Like, oh, don't judge me. And it's usually because Christians are judging non-believers. And, like, people that are still trying to get it right, or, think that they're love is love and all this stuff. And Christians are the first ones to judge non-believers, but we're not called to judge them, right, because we don't know what they're going through, right, and what God is doing within them. And half the time, I think us Christians, like, should keep our mouth quiet as far as, like, speaking when it comes to non-believers. But do I got that part right at least?
No, I think you do. And also I think we need to, as a believer, we need to get our life in order. Like it says, you're walking around picking at theirs, with the log in your eye. So I strongly believe that he's talking to the believers, like, get your life in order, get your life straightened out, and then you can talk to others and build them up, not judge them.
Yeah. Right when you said it, because, like, he says, don't... You have a log in your eye, and I feel like us believers, I don't know if he's talking to, like, I know he's talking to a crowd of people, but if we were to take it as if he's talking to us believers, right, like, I think that log is, like, the revelation of our sin and who we are in light of God. And then to the non-believer, they have a speck because they don't know any better right now. But
that's a good way.
Yeah, until Mary said it. Yeah.
But I think I know it's saying don't, like, people will say don't judge me, but I think really what Jesus is talking about here is, are we walking in righteousness in the particular area that we're accusing somebody else of not walking in righteousness, or the sin that they're committing? Are you actually doing that sin? Yeah. But because you don't want to Maybe because there's not a repentant heart in that particular area, you want to be quick to accuse other people. Because I know that I heard this long time ago, and I've just seen that it's not even a verse, but it just says a lot of times what irritates you in other people is the things that a quality you have in your own life that people are irritated by.
That you yourself are irritated.
Yeah.
That you struggle with. Yeah, that's
so
good.
it's a struggle you have, but you'll call it on everybody else. So maybe I think that's part of what he's trying to say here too, because that's why he's saying take it. In other words, deal with your sin before you deal with their sin. And it could be either the same exact sin, but it could be totally different too. In other words, are you seeking to walk in holiness? If you are and you're practicing that, not that you're perfect, but if you're actively seeking to walk in holiness, then it's okay to go ahead and bring a correction to your brother in love or your sister in love, but not so much that you're trying to condemn them, and like throw a sentence on them. Because just like the verse you guys were talking about earlier, I wanted to look it up, and it's in 1 Corinthians 5:12-13. It says, what right do I have to pronounce judgment on the unbelievers? That's God's responsibility. It says, but those who are inside the church family are our responsibility to discern and judge. So it's your duty to remove that wicked one from among you. So I think that we're in a church age now that we're people pleasers. So very few people are actively doing this in a godly fashion. Yeah, because we don't want to, we would rather pat people on the back and say, you're going to do good, Johnny. Just keep trying to do better. When all you're doing is that little pat on the back, you're pushing them to hell. More than anything.
But I think it's because Christians are afraid, Pastor. I think it's that. It's like instead of just calling it what it is, but I'm going to go further and say, I believe that people are not confident enough to say it because they're dealing with their own stuff.
Exactly. That's I thought that's the deeper one.
Yeah.
That's the deeper one.
Well, one of the things I was thinking of is when they brought Pharisees and the people were bringing the adulterous woman to Jesus, and they told Jesus, what are you going to do with this woman, right? And then Jesus, when he knelt down, he started writing in the sand, and he says, those of you that are without sin, without sin, cast the first stone. And I think about the church as a whole. I think about, and I'm saying this for me personally, because it's actually something I've actually been thinking about lately because of revelation that I got out of a scripture I recently just read. And, I had to examine my heart again, but I think about even, like I was even going back and reflecting, like, what about the little lies that you say or the little excuses that you say, even when you don't keep your word, if you don't, like, you make a promise or you say, I'm going to do something and you don't do it. And just those little tiny things like that is that beam in your eye. And I feel like you can't, who are we to really judge in general when we can't even, when we don't realize the little tiny things that we think aren't sin and is sin.
Yeah. I think it's healthy to, even though we're struggling with sin, I feel like it would be that iron sharpening iron. Like if I see a flaw in you, I'll point it out, and then you see a flaw in me, you point it out. And I think that's the iron sharpening iron.
That's a healthy way
to
do it. Yeah. But the problem is most of the time a person inside or outside the church that says, don't judge me, they're already convicted. It's just they don't want to hear it because they know that their heart's unsettled already. But you calling it out, it's putting a spotlight on it. So their reaction is, don't judge me. Get the light off of me. I'm sitting in darkness and I know it. Leave me alone. That's what they're saying most of the time. And they love to throw that at you because then they're like, hey, Jesus said don't judge. You know what I mean? And it's not so much, people think that you're chasing perfection. It's not. It's holiness that we need to chase above everything else. And when we actively walk that way, then I think that's when you can exercise I know we're calling it judgment, but it could be like correction. It could be encouragement. It could be, like looking out for a brother or a sister because they're headed towards a cliff and you see it because you've been there. So you're trying to identify the danger that they're heading towards, but they turn around and if they're not wanting to change, they're pretty quick to say, don't judge me.
And I also think it goes back, Pastor Tony, to something you've mentioned, and I've taken it to heart. How much time have you invested in that person to be able to go talk to that person and bring about correction? So, but with that being said, you guys are pastors now. So what happens to, you've been pastors, but now you have your own church. So what happens, how does it work? Because you see the leaders, you know people. I believe God gives us all discernment, but how do you, if you find out somebody's not doing something, how do you, either as a leader or as a pastor, go and speak to that person? You know that they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. How do you bring that conversation up?
I think it started with, or it started back when I started seeing fruit of having tough conversations, that I don't run to them, but I don't run away from them. And I think that's a healthy place to be, because just like right now, we're starting a church. We got probably about 35, 45 people, somewhere in there. And we're having one guy go ahead and start leading the men's ministry. He's a great guy, great testimony, has a charisma to do it, everything. But before we did that, I turned around and had a conversation with him and his wife. And this isn't, I don't know if it's something, I don't think this is something that most churches do, but I felt like this is what I need to do because God asked me to lead this church. So I turned around, had a little conversation. I spoke to the wife, who has nothing to do directly with the men's ministry. I said, I know that there's an accountability between me and your husband, but I want there to be accountability between you two and accountability between you and myself and my wife, so that at some point, if you feel that he should not be leading, I want you to know that there's an open door to talk to us. And that I know a lot of pastors don't like to do, because if you could prevent danger by having those little conversations that are uncomfortable, than to sit down and bring a big correction because something unfolded that you could have prevented by at least saying there's an invitation to talk, so that we don't have to ever go down that road. So that if danger comes, let's address it so it don't become a big issue. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm choosing to do as we see leadership develop in our church, is to have those conversations, know that I'm going to be that pastor that's not going to be pointing the finger at you, but I'm going to ask you how your prayer time is. Right. How are you reading what are you reading in the Word? What is God speaking to you? Right. And that's important, because if we can't have an ongoing conversation about that, then I don't know if you're supposed to be trusted in leadership. Right. So I know that some of these things might take a little bit longer to develop within a church, but I know it's going to be a lot more healthier because you're willing to have these conversations. And I've learned, like I said, not to shy away from them. I don't run to them. I'm not looking over people's shoulder to try to have this conversation, but I'm willing to do it because I've seen the benefit on both sides. It prevents so much danger and the casualties around the ministry, if you will, regarding what the leader's doing. So I'm not running quick to put people in leadership either. I'm waiting until the need is there. And God had told me already, everything has to happen organically. So I'm not just saying, hey, let's just have all these ministries just because all other churches have it. Right. No, let's wait to see what the need is. And as the need comes, God's going to bring the provision. There you go. And that's how I'm kind of doing this moving forward, to prevent things going south and having to get all into these sticky conversations of people feeling like you're bringing judgment and this and that. No, we talked about this up front, remember? Right. So
I feel like too, like the second verse, I think it's a scary thought. Like how we judge others will be brought back to us. Like almost like what goes around comes around. And I think if we reminded ourselves about that in the lens, we're quick to like, oh, that they haven't prayed much, or they, whether it's in the church or outside the church. I think that's a scary thing to me.
Okay, well, since you brought that up, what would you say, what would cause that? In other words, looking at the power of bringing a level of judgment towards somebody, what fruit would that cause within you to avoid doing that?
What fruit would it cause within me to avoid? I think looking at at them in the lens of like,
In other words, how would it change you?
I think looking at people differently. I think the best way that's helped me is like, how would you see them, God? And seeing them as little kids. For me, it's easy. That's what makes it easy for me to love the people that might be unlovable. Is like that's a little kid in there somewhere, you know. And whether it's like calloused or something, I feel like that's what helps me.
Or has tattoos all over their face?
Or tattoos, yeah. Because there's a little boy. They start out as a kid,
Yeah.
and like seeing old pictures of like my tío or my in-laws, grandparents. Like I'm like, man, everyone started out as a little boy or a little girl, and that's how I try to view people, and or like just a son or a daughter. And I think that saves me from going into that place of like placing judgment on them. And then because I'm like, I don't want to be judged as harshly as if I were to say something.
Yeah. I feel for me it's the same thing, but I go by how I look back at my past and how I grew up
Yeah.
and what God saved me from and what I used to do. And I think who might even, bring judgment or even think of that person. And honestly, I go with that more than anything because I always say, Lord, who am I?
Yeah.
I was there,
That's a
but
good
I was
way
even
to-
worse than that person.
Yeah.
And yet here I am, making judgment or thinking of a person a certain way because you don't even have to say something to judge somebody. You can be mentally judging somebody.
The way you look at
You
them,
could
yeah.
be mentally judging somebody just by, looking at them or look at that person, how they're behaving, looking at what they're wearing or da-da-da-da in your mind. And that's no different than you
That's like
vocalizing
discrimination,
it,
right?
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so for me, I look at it as, and it's kind of hard because I've been told when I turn around and defend people because of I'm like, well, I'm always trying to find the best of the situation or the best in the person. But then sometimes I'm being judged for not judging or looking at them the way they're looking at them because I don't see that. I have to see through the lenses of Jesus. How would Jesus see them? How did Jesus see me? And how did he accept me? His love was unconditional. And stuff like that. And so for me, that's something that I use that as my,
Yeah, I think that's a good filter.
Well, one of the things I was kind of looking for with that question is normally if we know how powerful it is to bring judgment on somebody, would probably sober us up to exercise more grace and mercy towards them. That's kind of in a nutshell what I was kind of looking for, because then you give them grace and you'll receive grace. You give mercy, you're going to receive mercy. So that's like the opposite of bringing a sentence or a judgment on someone. And by you exercising that, it's almost like you're using the reverse to make sure that, you're operating in a place that Jesus operated from. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the grace came from the agape love, then God's. I'm sorry, I'm saying the agape word. No,
She's back.
God's.
She relapsed.
Honestly, it goes back
Yeah.
to God's love. He says we're nothing. We can have all the gifts, everything, all these things, but if we have not His love, we're nothing. And I think it goes back to
I think
grace
that's the motivation
comes through
for sure.
God's love. The truth, and if we can't find that grace or we have a hard time or we're struggling with it, then we have to ask ourselves, what are we allowing in our lives that's quenching that love from coming out and flowing into the other person? So, we could say you need grace, but if you have not love, how are you going to get grace?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because unconditional love, especially with people that most people tend to like look at or look down on. In reality, God loves them. He loves the murderer. He loves the rapist. He hates what they're doing. He hates their sin, but he loves them. And in his eyes, he's hoping that they find him,
Well, maybe we could shift gears because on verse 5 it says, hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Okay, I know this is a different it's the same translation, but how it says, first get rid of the log in your own eye. Maybe we could shift gears and how quick are we to deal with us? Because that's part of what he's saying. Like, are you quick to deal with your stuff and get the junk out of the trunk so that you could at least be in a healthy place to help somebody else? because a lot of times we're not, if we want to be honest, we're not always so quick to get things right within us.
Well, can I read in the New King James Version? It says, hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
I get that, but what I'm getting, what I'm getting though is that it says first. First,
deal with
in other
yourself.
words, are we quick to deal with ourselves? Because a lot of times we're quick to point the finger. That's what I'm getting at. We're quick to point the finger, but we don't turn around and look at the thumb pointing back at us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think that's easy, Pastor Tony. Yeah,
I just felt like we should park here for a second.
No, and
at
I
least.
just, I think so too. And I really love that because, again, when I, like this, Ruth.
You put the thumb, I think it's the other fingers that come back at you.
Oh, yeah. I knew it was something. You're right. So one's pointing that way and three's pointing back.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thumb's pointing up. I'm
My bad. Sorry.
Ruth, that was a good, she's like, I had to do it. But I think that people do struggle, because I don't think people they don't want to admit that they have faults. And especially, I'm speaking about myself, especially when you start going to church. And when you turn your life over to God, you want to all of a sudden believe there's nothing wrong with me. Like, yeah, right. Like I believe what Pastor said, like you were busted and disgusted. I was like, oh, yes, I was. But it's like we carry so much. But as soon as I started going to church, I was quick to see it in everybody else. Not in the church. I thought everybody in the church was so holy. But no. So when I went out, like when I would go out with other people, I was like, oh, look what they're doing. Oh, look how they're dressed. Oh, look. And I was quick to do that. But it was getting into my word again. I can't stress that enough. There's like God was saying, Mary, you're looking at everybody else, but look at what you're going through. Deal with you. Allow me to go inside your heart, Mary, and let me deal with these things, the pride, the arrogance, the cussing, all those things. But I was like, no, I wasn't willing because I thought I'm already in church, I'm good. So it was easier to do the judging.
No, I agree 100%. I feel like I think it goes, like for me at least, I it's quick to like, talk about someone. Yeah. And then it's never to look back and like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Yeah. And I think it is something that, like I personally need to work on, because it's like no one wants to be looking at yourself, because then I feel like some people can go too far, and like, oh, I'm a piece of dirt or whatever, right. But then there's a healthy way to go about like pruning whatever it needs to be pruned.
Exactly.
Yeah, well,
allowing God, that's
well.
better.
I think to add to what you both are saying, especially how you mentioned going into the Word in James, the verse just came to my mind. James 1:23 and through 25, it says, if you listen to the word and don't obey, it's like glancing your face in the mirror. You see yourself walk away and forget what you look like. But if you look carefully into the perfect law that sets you free, and if you do what it says and don't forget what you heard, then God will bless you for doing it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's when people think that there's nothing wrong with them, they obviously have not been in their word. Because the word will point things out inside of you that you got to work on. And so I think that if you keep that in mind, and all of a sudden you feel like you're kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it like you've arrived or something like that. Maybe you need to get back into your word, because sometimes that missing piece of staying in the word almost provides a way for you to become a little self-righteous. Yes.
So would you say like someone is staying in their word, is it almost like where that is? I know it's a safe place to be if you're staying in. Would it be almost like you could be blameless? But I like how you just said self-righteous. That could be something that happens. But like say that they're just connected, or is it things that come up and you're like, okay, I didn't realize this.
Yeah, that's what I think.
You're always like almost like it's like a constant like just sifting out.
Yes, an awareness that it's like, oh, it's me. Yeah. Because I used to be really big on thinking everything was wrong with my husband. I was quick to judge him on everything. The way he talked, the things he said, the way he loved the boys, everything. I was like quick to judge him. And I thought I was so right. And then God's like, I'm not working on him. I'm working on you. And I was like, here I am thinking that he's the one with the problem. But God really humbled me when it came to judging other people, and especially judging my husband. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I was like that. But everything that I disliked in him was what I struggled with myself. Yeah.
And I think that's like a funny way God works is like
Yeah.
using our spouses as tools.
Right? Yeah.
And I think that like if you're quick to do that in your own marriage, I think those are the things like, okay, God's trying to teach me patience. And I learned so much from like my relationship before we were married. Like God taught me so many things that we need to deal with, but rather than dealing with it, we complain about it. Yeah. And God's like, no, this is for you. And I love that. Yeah. Well, I have a question. So we were saying judging believers and not judging non-believers, because I had this conversation with Ruth not too long ago as far as like what qualifies like as a believer, because in 1 Corinthians it says some stuff about like how we treat believers that aren't or living habitual sin, like they know it's sin but they keep doing it. That it says don't even eat with them. Like it's that severe. And I know like Mary had asked you about like how you deal with this stuff, but like where is like, how do we know like, okay, this person's a believer? If they confess like Jesus is Lord, and is that a believer, or is it someone who's like trying to walk it out, but then like still like they're like they know better, but they're not giving it to God?
I think it's somebody who consciously knows that they're sinning, habitually sinning, meaning that they're continually doing it over and over again. And even though it's been brought to their attention, hey, we noticed you've been da-da-da-da, and you've given them the opportunity to confess and make it right, but they choose not to and they continue doing it intentionally, then that's where it says, the Bible says, take a witness with you and confront them, and
There's a process.
There's
to
a
get
process
to that.
to
I
get
know
into
the
that.
process, but like where's that line? Like, okay, this is like someone that knows better.
I would look at what Mom was just saying regarding like conversations you've had with them, but I would also look at their maturity level, because sometimes a new believer, sometimes they're just a little hard-headed in the beginning. That sometimes they just don't understand that you're trying to speak truth to them. So sometimes I'll keep that as a factor on like how hard I kind of come down on them. But if it's somebody that I know that I've served God with, they know they've been a leader. I'll still be gracious, but I think I would be a little bit more firm in the conversation because it's needed. And because that's what Jesus says, I discipline those that I love. You know what I mean? So that's what we have to do as brothers and sisters, is that if we actually love people, we need to bring correction in a graceful, loving way with the heart of redemption. Yeah. That's the big thing. Not just to point out their flaws and you're messed up, you need to get it right, but there has to be a redemptive heart by which you communicate the grace and mercy to bring that correction. I think that has to be the underlying heart when you have those conversations, because if that's not part of what you're trying to get, that's not the outcome you're chasing, then you're just probably on a high horse, and just like Saul, you're going to get knocked off. Yeah. Is there any thoughts anybody else has? Ruth?
Yeah. No, because we were talking about the first half of that verse, which I love the version Mom read, where it says, hypocrites, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. I love that in the New King James it says, then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So I love that Jesus isn't just saying like, don't be judgmental, but he's saying if you actually self-evaluate and allow yourself to be molded by the word, you'll be in a position to rightly help your brother. And so I just like that, because I think we kind of focus on do not judge, but there is a right way to judge. And I think it's the line of not being judgmental, but allowing the Holy Spirit to rightly judge a brother. But you put yourself in that position to rightly do it when you're first evaluating yourself.
Well, not only that,
but it shows you, I just love how Jesus says that in the New King James.
well, not only that, by evaluating yourself, when you see clearly in the speck of the other person's eye, you're able to share with them, you know what, I had that same thing and I went through that and I experienced that. But let me show you how I got out of that.
I almost picture like two men who fell in a mud pit. I love the movie. It's a cartoon, but it's based off a book called The Pilgrim's Progress. But there's a moment where he's on his way to the celestial city, which is like heaven in the cartoon. It's like for kids, but it's also for adults. And they're in a mud pit. And the picture that comes to mind right now is if they both have mud on their eyes, one can't help the other. It's like we're trying, but we're just wiping the mud everywhere. Yeah. But if you first can rinse your face off, you can see clearly to help your brother who's also blind, you know? So there is a progression. It's not just don't judge, but it's like then you can rightly help correct your brother or sister in Christ, you know?
Correct. This is why, again, I'm so sorry, Pastor Tony, why we're supposed to get into your word, because then you have the Holy Spirit guiding you, that once you've cleared yourself or somehow emptied yourself of that sin, now you're able to correct somebody else with love.
Yeah. Right. And I know you're going to jump in real quick, Dad, but because even right after it says, don't cast your pearls to the swine. Oh, you're going to go in there? Okay. Well, because in Proverbs, it goes and it says, he who corrects a scoffer gets shame for himself, and he who rebukes a wicked man only harms himself. Do not correct a scoffer lest he hates you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. So I do think it ties into the whole thing, because I used to think, what the heck is that supposed to mean? Like, don't cast your pearls to the swine. But it's just the Lord saying, be wise on how you do it and who you do it to, because if not, you're just wasting time, energy, your words, etc.
Yeah. Not only that, if you correct somebody that you're not keeping in mind the Holy Spirit's wisdom, their maturity level and all that, because I've done that where I've corrected somebody and they just snapped, did not care, just wanted to ridicule me and make me feel stupid for even trying to help them. And that's what it's saying here is don't cast your pearls to the swine. If you know that somebody's not trying to live holy, but they want to actively participate in church and they want to wear the costume and this and that of being a Christian, and you know that they're not really trying to live a holy life. That's not their thing. They just want to participate in the Christian club. You know what I mean? Then just beware that you don't turn around and waste your time, not so much on the person, but on the attempt to see them get restored, because they're not even living right in the beginning. And they're actively, by the testimony they're walking out, they're showing and displaying that they don't want to change. They're loud and they're consumed in their own self, that I don't want to hear anybody tell me anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're just walking in pride, and it reeks.
And that brings me like to what Paul says, like in that situation, we would in a way like cast them out of the church, right?
Yeah, well,
because he says a little leaven leavens a whole loaf. So if other believers come in, especially new believers, and they see that, I think that's a hard thing for me to imagine, because like to be kicked out of a church, that's like the one place that's supposed to be all love is love, like love is above all. And for someone to get kicked out of a church, I feel like that's like,
I feel like that's an extreme. I feel like it's rare you find people who are that far gone.
I think you sit them in the very back.
Yeah. Well, I also think, kind of on the other side of it too, though, I think when people lash out, a part of a possibility of why they would lash out is like if they have a speck, what if they see the beam in your eye and they're like, how can you help me? So then they take offense rather than correction.
That's why it's important what Pastor Tony said, your dad, this guy over here, that is, you have to be walking in righteousness. Right. So in order to correct somebody else.
Yeah, for them to receive it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was going to say. How your mom just said that we were almost sitting in those shoes.
You were going to get kicked out?
Oh, no. Well, actually,
no, I'm asking, is that what you meant?
Actually,
because you guys did get kicked out, right?
Thanks. I was share that example too.
Well, it's good for people to know too. Like if they get kicked
that
out,
wasn't
they
the
know
example I was going to use, but just bring it home.
No. That's what I mean.
I get it. No, because like in our first church, this is exactly what happened, and it goes along with what you're doing. I mean, what you mentioned, and it produced the fruit that it was supposed to produce because it was done right. And here's the example: is that before mom came to the church, it was. I was in a church and I was just clocking in and clocking out, doing the church thing, but my heart had drifted away from God. So I fell into sin with another lady or a woman, and did what I shouldn't have done, fell into sin with her. And then my pastor found out. And then I saw Ida later on, shortly after in church, and I started talking to her. I went to my pastor and I said, hey, I want to start talking to her. He goes, no, you need to not do that. You need to sit down and get restored before you even think about talking to her. I said, okay, pastor, and did the exact opposite. I started talking to her. We started talking behind the scenes and this and that, writing letters and everything.
These were letters?
Yeah.
How old are you?
And
Telegram.
and then we had fallen into sin. And then we fell into sin. Once my pastor found out, he said, no, I warned you, you need to leave the church. And it was a church of maybe 50 people. Everybody knew everybody's business. And me being in there a few years before her, I automatically looked like the bad guy because I was the more mature one and she was a newer believer. Well, they kicked us out. And I felt like bad because during this time, all my family, I had kicked them all to the curb because I was chasing God, living with a lot of the brothers and this and that. Then this happened. And then I'm like, I ain't got my real family and I don't now I don't have my church family. And misery kicked in and I felt empty and I felt the sting of being kicked out of a church where people did love us. So it caused us to want to seek redemption. So we only knew each other 3 months, paid somebody the yellow pages so that we're not burning in lust like the Bible says. We wanted to make it right. We turned around and paid some guy with the toupee to marry us and when we had no money. I know it's like a funny, sad story, but we went to the library on 4th and F. They had a water fountain that didn't work, but it looked nice because that's all we could afford to rent because it was free.
Wait, you guys chose to get married by the fountain?
Yes.
Oh, that was your choice?
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought that was the only place you could get married.
Not the choice.
No, I'm saying that's,
Theater right there around the corner of the park.
that costed money, so that's why
okay, so
we
that was
rented
your
this
choice.
one because it was
Yeah.
free.
That's
You
crazy.
had to rent the library?
I said because it was free.
Available.
No, I said we rented the library because it was free. It's a joke. Yeah. Okay. It's not funny when you got to explain it. So we end up getting married there. And then we're still not invited back to the church. Well, there was a lady there that was kind of a spiritual mother for us. And she knew while we were going through all the junk we were going through ahead of time, during, and even after, because she continued reaching out to us. Well, she turned around and we were out maybe 2 months, something like that. And then she went to the pastor and said, listen, pastor, my son and my daughter need to come back to church. And then he turned around, okay, I'm willing to go ahead and talk to them. Came back, okay, Tony, and he moves more towards me, although it was to us, and says, okay, Tony, you know the ministry that we're a part of. If you come back, you have to sit down for ministry for 2 years. You can't do nothing for 2 years. And if you're willing to do that, I'll let you come back to church. I'm like, I would love to come back to church. Not serving killed me because without exaggerating, before this happened, I was doing like 8 ministries without exaggerating, leading outreaches, leading prayer meetings.
Worship.
Well, yeah, I did drums for a little bit. Thanks for bringing it up. Cleaning the church, all kinds of stuff. But I just wanted to get back home. So being kicked out, the fruit became good fruit because it was what I needed to make my heart right, to make everything right so that I could come back and have a clear conscience. So when I came back, I think I sat down for like 6 months, and then my pastor goes, listen, I know we're supposed to sit you down for 2 years. I feel like you learned your lesson. I see the remorse you have. I'm bawling at the altar every service because I miss God. I felt like he left my life. And I turn around, get all that right. And he goes, look, you could go and step back into ministry. I said, okay, I wasn't chasing ministry. I just wanted to get redeemed. So that's what the fruit of excommunicating somebody, if you will, from the church, that's the fruit it's supposed to produce. It wasn't intended that they kick us out. And then I just tell everybody under the sun, don't go back to that church. That's full of witchcraft and it's a cult. And that's not the fruit that is intended to produce during this. Now, let me go back to the other example. The other example was, what do you call it? I heard of a game this past weekend where it's called What If? And so me and your mom were talking because we're like, what if, because there was a person that had fallen into sin and then and we talked to them, fallen into sin. And we're like, what the heck? And we were like, what would we do if this happened again and you were the pastors of this person? And we both looked at each other and said, we would probably have to excommunicate. Or not I'm not kind of, well, that's kind of, that's the term some people will say. But that's the term some people will say, but really at the end of the day is you'd have to ask them to leave the church. And it goes back to what you said. Like, this is a place that's supposed to redeem you. Why is it that why is Paul even saying this? He's saying that because redemption's the fruit that it's supposed to produce. You're supposed to have a healthy fear of God and a conviction that you want to come back home. You know what I mean? That's what it's supposed to do. So we had to, because we sat in that and we had to get kicked out of a church at one point. Who gets kicked out of church? You don't hear about it no more because we as a church as a whole, we tolerate it. Yeah. We allow it, and then we wonder why our church don't have power. Yeah. And it's because we don't address the things that need to be addressed. And that's what Paul was saying, that this is Jesus' bride. Can we try to keep it clean? Not perfect, but can we at least seek holiness and a fear of God that's in this house, church? And that's what we're supposed to be aiming for and seeking in our churches in general. But we allow compromise, gray areas. You let homosexuals be in the choir and et cetera, because we don't want to. No, this is right and this is wrong. We don't have a backbone as a church anymore, and that's what we need to do. That's what God's called us to do, and not that you're being quick to condemn people. That's not what I'm saying. I am clearly saying that no, we have to choose to call out the things that need to be called out. According to how the Bible says it. Some things require that. Some things don't require. It's not as severe. Yes, it's sin, but there's other ways of redeeming a situation that maybe like sexual immorality requires you leaving the church. But there's other ones. Let's just say somebody has a tendency to lie. Does that mean you have to kick them out of the church? I don't really think so unless it became a real big issue. But I feel like that would be
It depends. I think it probably depends on the extent of how they're lying.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, I'll just say it, if you will, just for people listening. Let's just say it's you have a tendency to do what they call white lies from time to time. Okay, where it doesn't necessarily affect people. It's just you can't. Because I had a friend of mine that I was blown away when they said that this was their vice. I'm like, lying is your vice? Because I had other vices that I was like, these things are killing me. Yeah. And this brother was like, oh, I have a tendency to lie. And it came down because I was like, what? We're like, what? And the lie that he could not kick the habit of was exaggeration. And exaggeration is a lie because you're saying a truth, but you're adding more material to it to turn around and
I'm kidding.
And exaggerate something that you don't even have to exaggerate. Because sometimes there's no real point to exaggerate, but sometimes they'll make you look better. So that's why I'm saying, I'm not saying that certain sins should be tolerated. I just think they need to be addressed differently. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, kind of going, because I love that you shared the excommunication story for yourself.
Thank you.
Because I love what I forget about it, but how you said, I'll just say Mama D, when she batted for y'all to come back to church, I feel like that's also a way that we could. It's not just kicking people out and like, oh, okay, go to the world,
check in on them.
Yeah, but like the fact that she cared enough to still pursue. And to say, hey, it's not that we don't want anything to do with you, but we want what God has for you. Mm-hmm. And her pursuing you.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like that made all the difference.
Yeah, to be honest, if she wouldn't have went to bat, I don't know what our marriage would have looked like.
Yeah, so I feel like we need to be those people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to thank all the listeners, and remember, don't judge, because there's we're just not supposed to judge, okay? No, get right with God. Get right with God. Let God work with you. And then this way, if you see a flaw in somebody else, that you will be strategic and have wisdom when speaking to somebody else to try to get them right with God. So we thank you so much for listening, and can't wait to talk to you again.